hey, we're going to get this party started. Oops, I was going to... Bentley, as many of you know, is my little puppers. I've got his little Kong. We've got his Kong ready to go. Except I forgot the peanut butter. I had guests in the other week, and thank goodness they didn't eat all the peanut butter. Let me just get this ready for Bentley, and then we'll get started.
Oh,
so
by the
today,
way, I like your pink pot.
What's up?
Oh, by the way, I like your pink pot.
Oh, my pot. Thank you very much. It is my Staub, the cheaper version of a Le Creuset, and it's a wonderful cast iron. So I do like it too. Thank you very much. So once again, this is being done on Zoom for those of you who have signed up for my newsletter. And for others of you, you may be watching through YouTube. So I want to welcome you as well. So one of the first things that I had mentioned at the end of my last webinar was that I was going to do yogurt, but then I realized yogurt wasn't a very good cook along, but we're going to kind of modify it a little bit. And what I did was I started with the yogurt. It is, let's get the camera on it. You'll see it over here. And what you want to do is the reason you want to heat it up to like 180 is you want to break down the proteins a little bit, which helps it turn into the yogurt. So, oh, well, now it's turning down the temperature because I took it out of the water. But it's at about 180. So what I'm going to do, and I like stirring it while I do the yogurt, I'm going to turn it off because it needs to cool down to 110 degrees before, I think we might lose video in a moment, but I'll reconnect if we do. We need to have it go down to 110 degrees in order for be able to add the yogurt to it. And then, so it doesn't ruin the bacteria in the yogurt. Now, once again, I just want to remind everybody to be on mute, and I've got to wait for the other camera to come up, but we're going to, is it there? All right, I just need to do some technical stuff. Give me one moment. There we go. So we've got both views. All right, fantastic. All right, so we've got the milk that we raised to the temperature of about 180 degrees. If you're not sure what the temperature is, you can kind of like put your finger in it and it hurts. You really can't hold it in there. Water boils at 212 degrees, and milk, because it has other molecules in it, it boils at a different temperature. There's no consistent temperature that it does boil at, but you want to try to prevent it from boiling, because then you get this nasty skim on the top. I also like stirring it while it's heating up, so some of the milk proteins don't get stuck on the bottom either. So we're going to let that cool, and we're going to come back to it after we're done making our cabbage. So with our cabbage, what everybody should have in front of them right now. Oh, this is the yogurt. This is the yogurt that I'm going to use for the yogurt later. So I'm just going to set it aside for right now. So I have this bit of cabbage here, which when I sent you the recipe, I said it should be about 3 pounds. I know that's not 3 pounds, and I got a little bit of this butt end here, which is going to be part of it. So I'm going to get out my scale, turn it on, and I see that that's only about 1.4 pound, or 1 pound, 4 ounces. So 1.25 pounds. So what I did was, I want to use this cabbage up because I've had it for a little bit. I bought a brand new cabbage that just looks absolutely spectacular. And what I'm going to do is peel off some of the bigger leaves, because I can use these outer leaves for the top of the cabbage to help keep the cabbage submerged. I'm going to weigh this, and that, but it's leaning on something, so I've got to get a real weight. So that comes in at 4 pounds, 5 ounces. Well, if I want a total of 3 pounds, all I need is 1 pound 8 ounces off of this. So I'm going to cut it. I can always cut more or cut some off. It's a big old cabbage. So I went to a store and they had these big cabbages, but I knew I didn't need a whole lot. And so I asked if they would cut it, and they said no. I was very annoyed. All right, so I am going. Oh, that keeps on disconnecting. I am so sorry. I don't know what is going on with my internet. So I'm going to tear it so it goes to 0. And then I put that on there, and it's only a pound, so I need 8 more ounces. So I'm just going to, and it's all an approximation. I'm going to cut off another little chunk from here. Let's see what we got. Oh, we're going to tear it again so it zeroes out. Oh my goodness, I'm a really bad judge of that. That was only like 3 ounces. Let's get another chunk. And I wanted to go through all this because this is something that you'll have to go through at home, or if you're doing your cooking on, you might already have your cabbage ready. There we go. Oh, great. The 2 of these combined is close enough to 8 ounces as far as I'm concerned. So there we go. We've got our, oh, wait. So it was this. This was, right, we need 1 pound, 8 ounces. So we should have that with all of this. Oh, it's only 1 pound 3. Oh my, oh my. Take this off. Let's tear it again. Whenever you move the scale, it needs to be teared again. I want to make sure it's on as level of a ground as possible. All right, so let's see. 1 pound, 8 ounces. Woo, we're set. Okay. I'm going to get rid of this big piece. I'm going to spotlight both videos again. I'm going to take the scale away because I have my 1 pound, 8 ounces plus my 1 pound, 4 ounces. So all in all together, I have my 3 pounds. So that's the cabbage. What I want to talk about a little bit are these jars. So I have a wide mouth jar and a regular jar, and you can see the difference. The wide mouth jar works better in stuffing it, and this is 24 ounces up to here, 32 ounces up to here. So I can use this, and if I have a little extra, I can either just save the cabbage and cook it up or put it in another jar. So once again, these are the 2 different types of jars. You can see the difference in the lip. You'll see that this one curves over a little bit more, where this one's pretty much straight in. So we've got our 2 jars. And you can also, if you don't have canning jars, you can just reuse a jar. I reuse jars all the time. Like, so for example, I'm looking for a good example of a jar in my cabinets. Oh, here's one. So here's an example of a jar in which I have texturized vegetable protein in the TVP. And you'll see that it's a used barbecue sauce jar. So even if you don't have the canning jars, just reuse these jars to make your pickle, your fermented vegetables in. All right, so what you're going to do is I want to cut off the base of this. Get rid of that off to the side. And then I'm going to actually take the cabbage out of the bowl. Oh, and the other thing you need to have with you is if you want to have any seasonings, I have some dill seeds and some caraway seeds. I might throw a little bit of turmeric in there. And then I have the salt, which is very important part. So the salt is one of the very important parts of the fermentation process. So I have a big glass bowl, and this big glass bowl is where I'm going to put the cut cabbage in. So hopefully you have all of these pieces. I sent out the ingredients to you so you would have them. So one of the things is I already have a flat side to cut the cabbage on. If you're dealing with the whole cabbage, just cut a little bit of it off so you can set it on a flat side so it makes it safer for cutting. You want to slice the cabbage. So you have relatively thin, it depends on how thin or how thick you want it. And you can use your fingers as a guide, your knuckles, for how thick you're going to cut it. If you don't want to cut it all the way whole, you can slice it in half and cut it that way, because we're probably going to, in the end, cut some of those pieces in half anyway. And once again, you don't want to cut like this because you're going to chop your fingers off. Make sure you have that bear claw going. So not only can you use it as a guide, but you can help make sure that you get somewhat even thickness. If you don't get even thickness, then that's okay too, because then just different pieces will be slightly different textures. Some will be a little bit softer and some will be a little bit crunchier. I'm just going to stop for a moment. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut these in half and then place them in my big bowl. I'm do the same with this. Some of these bigger pieces that were the end, I might chop up a little bit more, or I am going to chop them up a little bit more. Don't forget to rinse your cabbage as well. I'm going to put this in there. Having sharp knives is important, but you also want to make sure you use proper cutting techniques and take your time. There's no rush. You don't have to be a fancy professional or, try to do fancy things. I have a friend of mine who cut the tip of a finger off using her brand new sharp knife. It's still some seeds. I'll have to get some more of those. So hopefully you're going through and you're chopping up your cabbage along with me, because this was a cook along. And cabbage isn't the only thing you can do. What you can do to add to this, if you wanted to, is you could add carrots and pickle it right along there with the cabbage. You can do carrots on their own. You can do radishes, either with the cabbage or on their own. And you follow the same type of ratio of the salt. So if you look in the recipe, if you don't have enough water to fill it up, or if the water starts evaporating as you go, you do 1 teaspoon of salt to 1 cup of water, and you add enough to submerge it. Sorry for the noise, but with those that live cook along, take this little bitty end. I'm going to add this to the bowl. All right, and meanwhile, I'm going to give everybody a minute to catch up. I'm going to rinse those outer leaves that I had previously to get the dirt off them so I can use them on the top. All right. So like I said, you can also shred some carrots in there if you want to. I'm going to give a quick check on YouTube to see if there are any questions. I do not see any questions on YouTube. So let us get to the next part. So we've got all of the cabbage cut up in relatively the same size strips. And so I've done this both ways. I've just taken it and put the salt and there was another recipe that called for some vinegar and I put that in there. And then this recipe, an awful lot of cabbage, calls for just taking the salt. And then what you do is you just massage it in. And as you massage it in, it breaks down, just kind of like when you salt an eggplant and it makes it water. And I chose the glass bowl to use so you could see it decrease in volume as we continue to massage. It's a great way to get out some aggression from the day as well, because you're not just gently massaging it, you're really working in the salt to the cabbage. If you want to do it in 2 different batches, as you can see, I'm making a little bit of a mess, but that's okay. I can just add it back in. I cleaned everything today. And we're just going to continue to massage that salt in. And about the salt that I used, as you can see, the recipe calls for like kosher salt or a sea salt. You don't want to use the iodized salt. The other salts work better because the iodine could change some of the fermenting. So you just want to go through and you want to massage it until you start getting some water in the bottom of the bowl. And you can see we're nowhere near that. So the salt I used was a Celtic sea salt. So this is going to take a little while. While we're massaging it in, what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about the prebiotics and the probiotics. We're going to have a lengthier discussion about that in October for our nutrition webinar. But the basics are the prebiotics are the fiber. It's what feeds the probiotics. So if you look at something like sauerkraut, it is providing you with both pre and probiotics naturally because it has fiber in it. And then by going through the fermenting process, it's going to create the probiotics, which help maintain a healthy gut. It helps with immunity. It helps with inflammation. And if 3 pounds of cabbage is too much and it's taking too long, as it's taking a bit of time, but you can see it's already getting smaller. I don't know if you can see any of the wetness coming out. But you don't have to do a full 3 pounds. You can do a little bit less. I actually have some of the core in here from the first piece. So I'm just taking that out as I'm massaging it because it's not going to get very limp. I can always add it back in and put it in later. Meanwhile, we're just massaging in. So your prebiotics are found in, like I said, your fibrous things. So a lot of your fruits and vegetables are amazing sources of prebiotics. It's amazing how many people buy pre and probiotics to take when you can just get it naturally through your food. And if I don't get enough liquid out of doing this, and if you don't get enough liquid out of doing this, then what we can do is just make that ratio of 1 teaspoon of salt and a cup of water to get enough liquid to cover it up once we put it in our wide mouth jar. Mine is still pretty crunchy. I don't know about yours. So the nice no cook along. And the yogurt also, just the milk boiling doesn't have any of the probiotics in it. But all you need is for yogurt, just kind of like sourdough bread. You need some sort of starter culture. So for me, I found the easiest thing to use for yogurt is an already made yogurt. I've tried it where I've just used probiotics and yogurt starters, and I would have to say the best success that I've had is just by using a plain yogurt as my starter culture. This can take a good 10 minutes or longer, depending on your patience level. The nice thing is you can always cheat along the way. If you've had enough of massaging the kale with the salt and not getting the results per se that you want, then what you can do is just kind of cheat at the end and use the salt water mixture. I don't know if I'm getting it all over the place, Oh, I don't know if you can see some of the water at the bottom. I don't know if it's coming through. See it moving around? So we actually did get some water from here. And that's part of the action of the salt, pulling the water out of the cabbage. It's the action of squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. All right, I think I am done with the squeezing. I am going to get my wide mouth jar. And I'm going to start stuffing the cabbage in there. And you want to stuff it in pretty tight. And if you can get your hand in there and push it down, that's the nice thing about using a wide mouth jar too, if you have smaller hands, is you can go in there and you can damper it down yourself and squeezing it in instead of using something. I think the 3 pounds is going to fill a little bit more than my 32-ounce jar. And part of the reason for that too is I probably should have massaged it. Oh, I know what part I forgot. Well, this will work out fine. I didn't massage it well enough. So I didn't add my spices. I forgot. But what I can do is make one without spices. Oops. And what I'm going to do is just pour out some of the liquid that's already in there. Okay, I'm just going to set this aside. And what I'm going to add are my caraway seeds and my dill seeds. And I'm just going to mix that up a little bit more. Some of the cabbage that fell off to the side. And you can really smell the aromatics of the caraway and the dill. You can do one, you can do both. And you can see it's a little bit easier to squeeze less, and I'm still getting more water coming out. All right, and with this, I've got to improvise now and find another jar. Just give me one moment. I also need jars for the yogurt. Mhm. Okay, I'm gonna. All right. So even though it's not a wide mouth jar, I am going to use the not so wide mouth jar. It'll just be a little bit more difficult to tamper it down. So I don't think I have another jar that's big enough. So I'm just stuffing the rest of the cabbage in there. It's just, once again, the wide mouth jar is easier to tamper it down. But what I can do is I have this, I can use something like this that fits in there and push it down using this. You can always improvise in the kitchen. That's one of the things that I love. Get the rest of this in here. For the liquid that was in there. All right, so now one of the issues that I have is you'll see that the one on the left is nice and full to the top. There's not much space because you have to remember, in most things, your enemy is going to be oxygen. And in this one, I didn't have the right size jar. And so because there was a little bit extra, that because I didn't mash it down as much as I probably could have, I've got a little bit of extra space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some of the liquid in, and it's going to kind of find its way down. You'll see it at the top, and it's going to find its way down on the side. So I know I'm going to need to make the added water mixture because it's got to cover this one. So all I'm going to do is take one, as I mentioned, 1 teaspoon of salt to 1 cup of water. And if you use warm water, it helps it dissolve faster. I pulled out a 1/4 teaspoon from my drawer. So just have to use 4, and I'm going to go and grab some warm water. To help it dissolve faster, that's the only reason why. And then I'm going to stir it to have it dissolve. Okay, and I'm going to pour some in the one that didn't quite go to the top, and I'm going to push it down a little bit more. And I'm going to add a little bit to the other one. And there you go. You'll see that both of them have a little bit of water on top, but now we need to cover them. You can get some sort of fancy piece. Oh, where is it? Crash, crash, crash. So this little fancy piece that I have, it goes on the wide mouth jar. And what it does is it helps keep the cabbage pressed down so no air gets in there. And of course, I'm having problems with my lid. Let me get a new one. Much better. So it's screwed on, and then what you do is I take this piece and I push it down, and it compresses the sauerkraut down. And what I'll do is I'll check it after a couple of days or tomorrow, actually tomorrow, make sure that the sauerkraut is still submerged in liquid, which you should be able to see. I'm having a hard time with figuring out where the camera is. Oh, I'm a little too close. Making sure it's submerged in the liquid. And what I'll do is I'll check it again tomorrow, push it down and make sure it's still submerged and add more water if I need to. I have some left. And so all I'm going to do is put that in the fridge. Now with this one, because it's not filled all the way up to the top, and as we mentioned, air is the enemy, we want to keep all of the cabbage as submerged as possible and covered. And that's where these big old leaves come into play. So all I need to do is put the, I can get rid of a little bit of the rib. That's a little bit hard to maneuver in there. But what this does is this helps protect the cabbage so it doesn't get oxidized and it can continue the fermentation. So I've got one in there and I just need to maneuver it because it should, you want to make sure that it covers all of the cabbage and that all of the cabbage is submerged in liquid. I'm going to put one more piece in there. I want to really make sure it's covered on the edges. And then all you need to do, you got a couple of options. You can get a coffee filter and put a lid on there to keep it. And you can even be simpler than that. And use a napkin or a flour sack towel. There's my flour sack towel. And just put it over the top of it with a rubber band and set it off to the side. And you want to check this every day to make sure that you push down on the cabbage that's in there to make sure that all the big leaf cabbage, to make sure all the shredded cabbage is covered. So that's pretty much how you make the sauerkraut. You just kind of let it sit for a couple of days and then it'll go through the fermentation process. You can taste it so you get the crunch level that you like. There's no specific amount of time, usually 3 to, I don't know, 10 days, really depending on what your preference is. And then what you can do is just put a tight sealed cover on it, put it in the fridge, and it'll usually last at least a month or two. Now, do I have any questions? You can put them in the chat box or unmute yourself. Any questions with regards to the sauerkraut? And if you look in the recipe or in the chat box, you have the recipes in there. All right, I'm going to get some of these items out of the way. And then we can move on to our yogurt. So with the yogurt, like I said, we already heated it up to 180 degrees. And then we've been sitting it and letting it cool while we've been doing the cabbage. I'm going to test it with my thermometer. You can get a thermometer for like $10. Right now, the temperature of it has gone to 104, which is below the 110. So all I'm going to do is heat it up for a little bit, which I have done so many times and it still works out. I want it at the 110. We'll just give that a few minutes. I usually do not put any kind of flavoring into my yogurt during the fermentation process. So once we get it back up to that 110 degrees, I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to add the yogurt that I measured out before. You can use 2 to 3 tablespoons and that usually works fine. All right, I am up to my 110 degrees. I am going to give it a little bit of a stir. Once again, you don't want it much hotter than 110 degrees because then when you put the yogurt in, it's going to kill the bacteria and then you're not going to get yogurt. So I have 2 to 3 tablespoons. We're going to just scoop this over so it's under the camera. 2 to 3 tablespoons of plain. I'm using non-fat yogurt. You can use full-fat yogurt. It doesn't matter. And just going to get it off the spoon a little bit. If I have some probiotics that are refrigerated, because if the probiotics are not refrigerated, there's a good chance they're dead. And all you do is whisk in the yogurt. So I would use 3 tablespoons if I'm not adding any additional probiotics. And you can probably get away with 2 tablespoons if you are. And you just want to whisk it or stir it together so the yogurt starter that you put in is well combined. And at this point, the other thing that you want to do is preheat your oven to about 110 degrees, which is really next to impossible to do because the lowest you can get it is 170. So just put it on, preheat it. If you have a thermometer in your oven, which I recommend that you do anyway, because most ovens will run different anyway, and different temperatures, and as your oven ages, it might not heat as well. And let it cool off till it gets to about 110. Or if you just turn your oven on with the light on, which I keep the light on overnight anyway, once I put the yogurt in there, and that helps keep it at 110 degrees. So you can pour it into individual jars. You can pour it into one big jar, kind of whatever floats your boat. I just tend to use a bunch of random jars that I have lying around. And I fill those up. And I used 1 quart of milk for those of you who missed the beginning. And 3 tablespoons of yogurt as my starter culture. You can then use this as your starter culture for your next batch, just kind of like you do with the sourdough bread or something like that. And what I like to do is put a cover on these when I put them in the oven with the light on. Make sure you do not turn the oven on when you put the cover on them. And I just use the same type of napkin or paper towel just to cover them up while they're in the oven. And that is how you make 2 fermented products, which are going to be your probiotics. And the sauerkraut also acts as a prebiotic because of the fiber. And once again, you can use other vegetables instead of cabbage to make the fermented. And it's kind of like a similar way to make kimchi. And then once again, I'm just going to take these yogurts and I am going to put them in the oven and let them sit overnight, about 8 hours, and then take them out in the morning as I'm getting ready. So they come to a little bit more room temperature, put a lid on them, tightly put them in the fridge, and I've had it last up to a month. So that is it. Does anybody have any questions? I'm gonna take the phone off, and you've got me now. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. Well, then I want to thank you for being a part of Epicure Nutrition's cook along. For those of you who did cook along, we made the sauerkraut. And if you happen to read the newsletter, you saw that we were going to do the yogurt on the bookends. And there are a few changes that are happening. We're going to do 1 webinar a month now instead of 2. It'll fluctuate between a nutrition webinar and a cooking demo or a cook along. So you'll just need to check out on your newsletter. If you're watching on YouTube and not getting the newsletter, please sign up at epicurenutrition.net. You can email me at Karen@epicurenutrition.net as well, and I can help get you signed up on the newsletter. I want to thank you very much for partaking in this event today. Go to the chat box for those of you on Zoom and download the recipes, and you should have received them in the newsletter as well. Thank you very much, and I wish you an absolutely amazing week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank